Have you ever found yourself caught in a cycle of emotional exhaustion, maybe after checking your phone first thing in the morning, only to feel your mood swing based on a comment, a like, or worse, the lack of them? Or perhaps you've lain awake at night replaying a conversation, obsessing over what someone thought of you, trapped in an endless loop of what-ifs and should-haves. This isn't just stress, it's emotional overinvestment, a modern epidemic where we pour far too much of ourselves into things we can't control, leaving us drained, reactive, and at the mercy of external forces. But what if there was a way to step back, not to stop caring, but to care wisely? That's where Stoicism, an ancient philosophy forged in the fires of human struggle, offers something revolutionary. A path to emotional resilience that doesn't require shutting down or numbing out. Imagine holding your emotions like open hands instead of clenched fists, able to engage fully with life while staying anchored in calm clarity. This is the gift of Stoic practice. For centuries, from Roman generals to enslaved philosophers, people have turned to these principles to endure hardships we can barely fathom. Not by suppressing their humanity, but by mastering the art of detachment. And here's the surprising truth: detachment isn't cold indifference. It's the freedom to choose where your energy goes, to respond rather than react, and to reclaim the power you've been handing over to people, outcomes, and circumstances that don't deserve it. In this video, we'll explore 25 Stoic practices that act like mental armor against emotional overinvestment. These aren't abstract theories, they're battle-tested tools for dialing down the noise of modern life and reclaiming your peace. You'll learn how to catch yourself before you spiral into needless worry, how to reframe setbacks as fuel for growth, and most importantly, how to cultivate a mindset where external chaos doesn't dictate your inner world. This isn't about becoming unfeeling, it's about becoming unshakable. So if you're ready to stop being emotionally hijacked by things outside your control and start building a life of steady strength, let's begin. The first and most transformative Stoic practice is understanding the dichotomy of control, the radical idea that peace begins when we sort every worry, every frustration into two simple categories: what's within our power and what isn't. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. Your grip tightens on the steering wheel, your heart races, you're furious at the red lights, the slow drivers, the universe itself. But here's the Stoic interruption: none of those things respond to your outrage. The traffic isn't listening. The only thing you truly command in this moment: your breath, your focus, your decision to use this time to rehearse your presentation or listen to an audiobook instead of drowning in impotent rage. That's the dichotomy at work. This principle was the bedrock of Epictetus's teachings, a former slave who knew more about powerlessness than most. He famously said, "Some things are up to us and some are not." Notice he didn't say those external things don't matter. He said they aren't yours to rule. Your job promotion, partly up to you. Your preparation, your attitude, but also dependent on your boss's mood, company budgets, even luck. A friend's opinion of you, you can act with kindness and integrity, but their judgments belong to them, not you. The Stoics weren't naive. They knew life would keep throwing uncontrollables at us. Their insight was that suffering multiplies when we keep grabbing for the steering wheel of things that were never ours to drive. Consider how this plays out in modern scenarios. At work, you might obsess over a colleague's snide comment in a meeting. The Stoic ask, can you rewrite their words? No. Can you choose whether to internalize them, whether to let them derail your confidence or fuel your growth? Absolutely. In relationships, you can't force someone to text back or meet your emotional needs, but you can examine whether you're investing in people who reciprocate your energy. The magic here isn't pretending not to care, it's redirecting your care toward what you can actually influence. Try this exercise tonight. Take a blank page, draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything weighing on you right now. Your noisy neighbors, a looming deadline, your kids' grades. Now cross out anything that doesn't directly respond to your actions. What remains, that's your true sphere of power. The rest, that's where you practice the hardest skill of all, letting go without giving up, because emotional freedom isn't about having a perfect life. It's about knowing where to direct your effort and where to shrug and say, "That's not mine to fix." Now that you understand the dichotomy of control, let's talk about how to make it a daily habit, because Stoicism isn't just philosophy, it's practice. Start with a simple morning ritual. Before you even check your phone, take 5 deep breaths and ask yourself, what's truly mine to steward today? Maybe it's your patience during a tedious commute, your focus in a chaotic work meeting, or your decision to disconnect from social media triggers. The key is to set this intention before the day's chaos hits, like sharpening your axe before chopping wood. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools here. Not the vague, Dear Diary kind, but targeted prompts that force you to confront the dichotomy head-on. Try this each evening. Write down 3 things that frustrated you, then label them. Circle what was within your control, cross out what wasn't. You'll start noticing patterns. That angry email from your boss, you can't control their tone, but you can control whether you reply defensively or wait an hour to respond calmly. The weather ruining your weekend plans, outside your power, but how you adapt. Indoor hobbies, quality time with family, is entirely yours. Over time, this exercise rewires your brain to spot the difference between productive effort and futile resistance. Mindfulness is another ally. When you feel tension rising, say, during a political debate or seeing an ex's social media post, pause and physically relax your shoulders. Ask, is my reaction aimed at something I can change? If not, visualize placing that concern on a leaf and letting it float down a river. This isn't avoidance, it's conscious redirection of energy. One CEO client of mine keeps a sticky note on her laptop that reads, "Influence or release," a 2-word mantra that stops her from wasting hours agonizing over market fluctuations she can't alter. For deeper practice, adopt the Stoic reserve clause, adding "fate permitting" to your plans. Instead of saying, "I'll close this deal by Friday," rephrase it as, "I'll do everything in my power to close this deal, fate permitting." This tiny linguistic shift acknowledges reality without passivity. You'll still work relentlessly toward goals, but the emotional stakes change. Setbacks become feedback, not failures, because you've already accepted that outcomes aren't yours to command. Finally, play the Stoic spectator game. When watching sports, notice how fans scream at referees as if their outrage could reverse a call. Then reflect, where are you doing the same? Maybe obsessively refreshing a dating app match who ghosted you, or pleading with a family member to change their beliefs. The stadium's a mirror. Every time you spot someone raging against the uncontrollable, ask, what's my version of this? Humor helps too. One student of mine named his inner control demanding voice Captain Fix-It, and now laughs when it barks orders at traffic jams. These practices aren't about perfection. Some days you'll still catch yourself white-knuckling the steering wheel of life. But with each small moment of release, each conscious choice to focus on your breath instead of the traffic, your effort instead of the outcome, you'll build emotional muscle. And that's the ultimate goal, not to control the world, but to govern your response to it. Here's a counterintuitive truth. The best way to stop fearing loss isn't to avoid thinking about it, it's to stare it straight in the face. This is the heart of premeditatio malorum, the Stoic practice of negative visualization. Picture Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, sitting in his opulent home, deliberately imagining it all gone, his riches seized, his status erased, even his life cut short by the whims of a tyrant. Far from morbid, this exercise was his secret weapon against anxiety. By mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios, he didn't just brace for hardship, he robbed it of its power to shock him. When Emperor Nero eventually ordered his exile, Seneca's response was legendary. "Is this all you've got? I've lived this 1,000 times in my mind." Modern psychology backs this up. Exposure therapy works because familiarity dulls fear's edge. Think of how a horror movie loses its grip after the third watch. The jump scare stops making you flinch. Negative visualization does the same for life's uncertainties. A startup founder might visualize their company failing, not to dwell in despair, but to realize they'd still find meaning in teaching or starting over. A parent might imagine losing their job, then notice how their kids would care more about bedtime stories than a paycheck. The goal isn't to manifest disaster, it's to expose the lie that your happiness depends on everything going right. Try this tonight. Set a timer for 5 minutes and mentally play out your deepest fear: a breakup, a layoff, a health scare. Notice the details. Where would you live? Who would help you? What skills would you rely on? You'll often find that the anticipation of pain is worse than the pain itself. A student of mine practiced this before a high-stakes pitch. When his projector failed mid-presentation, he laughed internally. He'd already imagined this moment and delivered the talk from memory, forging a stronger connection with his audience. History's greatest Stoics turned this into ritual. Before sailing, Roman generals would visualize shipwrecks, not to curse their voyage but to pack extra supplies. Musonius Rufus, exiled to a barren island, wrote that the rocks became his gym, the scarce food a lesson in gratitude. By embracing the worst, he found it couldn't break him. This mindset is why Navy SEALs survive Hell Week. They've mentally cataloged every blister and hallucination long before the training starts. The magic lies in the afterward. Once you've walked through the fire in your mind, two things happen. First, you're calmer in crises because they feel familiar, not foreign. Second, and this is the golden insight, you start noticing how much you've taken for granted. Imagining your partner gone makes you treasure their laugh tonight. Visualizing illness makes you grateful for today's walk in the sun. The Stoics called this the double blow. You soften the sting of loss while amplifying joy in what you have. One practical twist: pair this with gratitude journaling. After visualizing losing your home, write down 3 things you love about it right now. This isn't pessimism, it's anti-fragility. Like a tree that bends in storms because it's grown through winds, you'll find yourself less rattled by life's blows. Because when you've already faced the monster under the bed and realized it's just shadows, you stop flinching at every creak in the night. Modern negative visualization works best when you make it specific, personal, and grounded in your daily life. Start small. Don't plunge straight into your deepest fears. Instead, pick a mundane frustration: your phone shattering, missing a flight, or your favorite cafe closing down. Close your eyes and play it out in vivid detail. Where would you go for coffee instead? How would you handle the inconvenience? The goal isn't to spiral into worry, but to uncover hidden resources, the adaptability you've underestimated, the alternatives you've never noticed. For career setbacks, try this exercise during your next commute. Imagine walking into your office to find your position eliminated. Feel the initial punch to your gut, then fast forward. What's your first move? Updating your resume, calling a mentor. Notice how your mind begins problem solving almost reflexively. One tech executive I worked with did this monthly. When layoffs hit his company, he was the calmest in the room. He'd already mentally rehearsed networking lunches and freelance opportunities. His colleagues, caught off guard, panicked. Health challenges require a gentler approach. Visualize waking up with chronic back pain, not to invite it, but to appreciate your current mobility. Would you finally try swimming? Rearrange your workspace. This isn't about resigning yourself to suffering. It's about rehearsing resilience. A client with autoimmune disease credits this practice for her calm during flare-ups. By preemptively imagining cancelled plans, she'd already curated a toolkit: audiobooks for bedrest, friends who deliver soup, gratitude for remission days. Timing matters. Ancient Stoics practiced this at dawn or dusk, moments naturally ripe for reflection. Try pairing it with an existing habit while brushing your teeth mentally. Lose your toothbrush. How would you improvise? This trains your brain to treat disruptions as puzzles, not catastrophes. The key is frequency, not duration. 60 seconds of vivid mental rehearsal daily builds more resilience than an hour of vague worrying once a month. Ground the practice in reality by reviewing past hardships you've survived. That brutal breakup 5 years ago, you learned to cook Thai food, the failed business venture. It led to your current career. This retroactive negative visualization proves you're more adaptable than you think and primes you to trust yourself in future storms. End each session with a deliberate savoring of the present. After imagining your car totaled, step outside and truly feel the seat beneath you, the engine turning over. That's the alchemy of this practice. By touching the void, you return clutching gratitude tighter than fear. There's a profound difference between enduring your fate and loving it, between gritting your teeth through life's curveballs and seeing them as essential threads in a tapestry you wouldn't rewrite. This is Amor Fati, the Stoic art of embracing whatever happens, not with resignation but with a kind of fierce gratitude. Centuries after Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journals, Nietzsche would call this same idea his formula for greatness, not just bearing necessity but wanting it so. Picture Marcus on the front lines of war, plagued by illness, betrayal, and the weight of an empire. His private writings reveal no bitterness, only a relentless reframing. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When his children died young, he didn't curse the gods. He wrote of mortality as nature's reminder to live fully. When political rivals schemed against him, he saw them as whetstones sharpening his patience. This wasn't delusion, it was alchemy, turning leaden circumstances into gold by choosing their meaning. Modern psychology echoes this in post-traumatic growth, where survivors of adversity often report heightened resilience, deeper relationships, or newfound purpose. But the Stoics went further. They didn't wait for trauma to force growth. They preemptively trained themselves to see setbacks as hidden deliveries of strength. A musician who loses hearing, Beethoven transformed tinnitus into compositions that redefined music. A scientist exiled for her beliefs, Marie Curie turned isolation into focused research that won 2 Nobel Prizes. The common thread: they didn't just overcome hardship, they used it. Practice this by reframing daily irritations as drills for Amor Fati. Your flight gets cancelled. Instead of fuming, ask, what does this make space for? Maybe an unexpected conversation at the gate or catching up on reading. Your project fails. That's data, not destiny. One entrepreneur I know keeps a gratitude for disasters. List the failed startup that led to her meeting her co-founder, the broken wrist that taught her to delegate. Over time, she stopped fearing chaos and started spotting its gifts like a treasure hunter. Nietzsche's version was even more radical. My formula for human greatness is Amor Fati. Not merely to bear necessity, but to love it. He wrote this while suffering debilitating migraines and near blindness, yet producing his most brilliant work. His insight: fighting reality drains you, loving it fuels you. When you stop yelling at the rain and start dancing in it, you unlock a paradoxical power. The very things meant to break you become the weights that strengthen you. Try this tonight. Pick one current struggle and write down 3 ways it's reshaping you for the better. No toxic positivity, be honest. A strained relationship might be teaching you boundaries. A financial pinch could reveal creative frugality. Even lost calves hollows in us where future joy can pool more deeply. The goal isn't to deny pain, but to mine it for its hidden offerings. Because when you stop seeing fate as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something that happens for you, you stop surviving life and start thriving through it. Here's a shift in perspective so powerful that astronauts return from space forever changed by it, not just awestruck, but fundamentally recalibrated in how they see human problems. It's called the overview effect, that moment when viewing Earth from orbit, national borders vanish and personal grudges feel laughably small. The Stoics knew this mental shift centuries before rockets existed. They practiced the view from above, a visualization technique where you mentally zoom out not to dismiss your struggles, but to see them in their true proportion. Picture this: you're agonizing over a rude comment from a coworker. Now imagine pulling back in your mind's eye, seeing your office building from a drone's height, then your city, then the continent. Keep going until you're floating where satellites orbit, watching that same coworker as a speck among billions. Suddenly, their pettiness isn't a boulder crushing you, it's a grain of sand on an endless beach. This isn't about denying your feelings, it's about context. That argument that felt earth-shattering at dinner, from Neptune, it wouldn't even register. Astronauts describe this as the ultimate reality check. Chris Hadfield, after months in space, admitted he stopped sweating small stuff entirely. Seeing Earth as this fragile blue marble makes you realize how much energy we waste on things that don't matter. Ancient Stoics like Marcus Aurelius reached the same conclusion without leaving the ground. His journal is filled with reminders to take Plato's view, imagining human affairs from mountaintops or celestial vantage points to spot their fleeting nature. When a Roman senator insulted him, Marcus reportedly chuckled and said, "When the stars watch us squabble, they must find us terribly entertaining." Modern science explains why this works. Psychological distance literally changes how our brains process emotions. Studies show that people who visualize problems from a third-person perspective make wiser decisions and feel less distress. A CEO client of mine keeps a Hubble telescope image of the pale blue dot above his desk. When negotiations get heated, he glances up and remembers none of them will matter in 100 years. But here's the key: this practice isn't just for minimizing pain. It's also a lens for amplifying joy. When you zoom out, you start noticing what does hold cosmic weight. Your child's laughter in the grand silence of space, the miracle of clean water when viewed alongside deserts, the privilege of love in a vast, indifferent universe. The view from above strips away trivial distractions so you can invest deeply in what truly shines from that altitude. Try this tonight. Lie on your floor and stare at the ceiling like it's the night sky. Imagine your worries as tiny specks drifting past distant galaxies. Then ask, which of these will I remember when I'm old, which actually shape the legacy I leave? You'll find most anxieties dissolve like fog in sunlight, while a few truths burn brighter. The relationships you nurture, the work that matters, the moments you fully showed up. That's the double gift of this practice. It shrinks your ego while expanding your gratitude. Because when you stop confusing molehills for mountains, you finally start climbing the real ones. Journaling wasn't just a habit for Marcus Aurelius, it was his battlefield. Every morning before dawn, with Rome still asleep, the emperor would sharpen his mind like a sword on parchment, wrestling with his flaws, preparing for the day's chaos. What's remarkable isn't that he kept a journal, but how he wrote, not as a diary of events, but as a dialogue with his highest self. This is Stoic journaling at its core, a practice less about recording life than rehearsing how to live it well. Start with this contrast. Modern journaling often asks, "What happened today?" Stoic journaling asks, "How did I meet what happened?" Instead of replaying conversations like a movie, Marcus dissected his own reactions. "When you wake reluctant," he wrote, "remember, your work is to act as a human, not a puppet pulled by strings of comfort." His pages were a mirror held up to his soul, revealing where he'd been ruled by impulse rather than principle. The structure is simple but transformative. First, morning preparation. Before checking your phone or email, write down 3 mental defenses against the day's predictable traps. For example, traffic will test my patience. I choose to listen to a podcast instead of simmering in rage. My boss may criticize. I'll hear feedback without self-worth crumbling. This isn't manifesting positivity, it's preemptive emotional armor. One executive client calls this her cognitive vaccine, inoculating herself against reactions before they hijack her. Evening reflections dig deeper. Borrow Marcus's 3-question template. 1. Where did I act against my values today? Not generic guilt, but specific course corrections. Maybe you snapped at a barrister. Why? Fatigue. Ego. 2. What's one thing I can release? A resentment, a pointless worry. Visualize handing it to the universe like returning a library book. 3. What showed me beauty? Even on brutal days, the Stoics hunted grace, a stranger's smile, afternoon light through a window. This trains your brain to spot resilience's raw materials. For emotional storms, use Seneca's letter to myself method. When rage or envy strikes, grab a notebook and argue with yourself as if counseling a friend. You're furious they got the promotion, but is your worth measured by their progress? Remember last month's contentment walking your dog in the rain. Writing forces emotional viscosity, slowing reactions until they're fluid enough to pour into wiser choices. Modernize it with obstacle journals. Whenever you face a setback, a missed flight, a failed project, write 2 alternate interpretations. This ruined my trip becomes, this gifted me an unplanned afternoon to read, or this taught me to pack essentials in my carry-on. Cognitive behavioral therapists call this reframing. The Stoics called it alchemizing. Frequency beats length. 5 minutes daily builds more muscle than marathon sessions weekly. A teacher I know keeps a pocket notebook for microjournaling, recording just 1 sentence per class break. Lost my temper with third period tomorrow. 3 deep breaths before speaking. Tiny entries, massive awareness. The magic lies in rereading. Every full moon, review your pages. You'll spot recurring traps. I always regret late night emails and hidden growth. Last year, this criticism would have crushed me. Marcus didn't write for publication. His meditations were private drills until discovered after his death. That's the key. Write like no one's watching, because the only audience that matters is your future self. Flipping back through these pages to measure not what changed in your life, but what changed in you. Imagine you're about to walk into a meeting where your proposal will be ripped apart. Your stomach tightens, your palms dampen. Now rewind. What if you'd already walked through that scenario dozens of times in your mind, not fearing it, but preparing for it? This is preemptive emotional alignment, the Stoic art of rehearsing your composure before life tests it. Like a fire drill for your emotions, this practice turns potential meltdowns into manageable moments by stripping away the element of surprise. The ancient Stoics didn't wait for crises to practice virtue. They staged mental rehearsals daily. Seneca would intentionally picture insults hurled at him, then craft measured responses in advance. When the real insult came, it wasn't a shock, it was an expected guest. Modern psychology confirms this method. Navy SEAL use stress inoculation training, deliberately exposing themselves to simulated high-pressure situations until their nervous systems stop treating chaos as an emergency. Start with predictable irritants. Your commute's traffic jam isn't an anomaly, it's a recurring event you can script. Try this while brewing morning coffee. Visualize bumper-to-bumper traffic. Hear the horns, feel the urge to rage, then picture yourself switching to an audiobook or taking deep breaths. The key is specificity. Don't just think, I'll stay calm. Mentally practice how, rolling your shoulders down, humming a tune, even laughing at the absurdity of shaking your fist at a red light. For social anxieties, pre-rehearse conversations. If you dread family gatherings where politics erupt, draft 3 neutral responses beforehand. That's an interesting perspective. What shaped your view? Or let's table this and try Aunt Me's pie. Like an actor running lines, you're programming graceful exits before the drama starts. A client who feared networking events now spends shower time practicing her exit lines, polite ways to disengage from boring conversations, making mingling feel like a game rather than a minefield. Dig deeper with if-then scripting. Epictetus advised students, when someone insults you, say internally, they're acting from their own damage. Modernize this by creating personal mantras for triggers. If my coworker takes credit for my idea, then I'll casually add context in the next meeting without malice. If my flight's delayed, then I'll call an old friend during the wait. These mental blueprints prevent knee-jerk reactions by giving your brain a preloaded playbook. The magic lies in repetition. Athletes don't practice once before a game. They drill movements until they're muscle memory. Similarly, mental rehearsal weakens emotional hijackings. Picture a pianist who stumbles during recitals by playing flawlessly in her mind 100 times first. She's less likely to freeze on stage. One executive I coach visualizes her toughest board member scowling during presentations. Now when it happens, she winks internally, right on schedule, and speaks even more clearly. But here's the twist: preemptive alignment isn't about controlling outcomes, it's about owning your response. Ancient Stoics paired this with the reserve clause, acknowledging fate permitting. You might rehearse a calm reaction to criticism, but the meeting could get cancelled. That's fine. You've still strengthened your emotional reflexes for next time. Close each rehearsal by savoring the relief of composure. After mentally navigating a tense confrontation, pause and feel the quiet pride of staying steady. This conditions your brain to associate triggers with mastery rather than dread. Like a chess player who studies in games, you'll start seeing life's irritations not as threats, but as puzzles you've already solved. Because when you've walked through the fire in your mind, the real sparks feel like familiar warmth. The Stoics drew a line in the sand that still startles modern minds. They called wealth, fame, even health, indifference. Not meaningless, not worthless, but indifferent to your core worth. Picture a master carpenter judging his skill by the straightness of his cuts, not the price of his tools. That's the radical shift in perspective. Your reputation isn't you. Your bank balance isn't your value. These are externals, preferred or dispreferred, as the Stoics said, but never the measure of your soul. This classification cuts through today's obsession with metrics, likes, promotions, net worth by making a crucial distinction. Some things are worth pursuing, but none are worth defining you. A Stoic might diligently build their career, but when a rival gets the promotion, they don't crumble because their self-esteem wasn't mortgaged to the outcome. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: you may be unhappy because you are not a consul, but can you be unhappy if you don't want to be a consul? The power lies in your valuation, not the thing itself. Modern materialism makes us double hostages, first by chasing possessions, then by fearing their loss. Notice how social media transforms indifference into addictive fuels. That notification hit isn't joy, it's relief from the anxiety of not being seen. The Stoic antidote: test drives periodically, fast from indifference to prove you're still you without them. Wear old clothes to dinner, turn off read receipts. A tech CEO client of mine spends 1 week annually living on his assistant's salary, not as poverty tourism, but to remember his worth isn't tied to his penthouse. But here's where people misunderstand Stoic indifference. It's not apathy. The ancient Stoics were deeply engaged citizens. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome while calling honors empty. They pursued excellence not for the rewards, but because virtue expresses itself through action. Think of an Olympic athlete who trains relentlessly yet can say, "If I break my leg tomorrow, I'm still whole." That's the balance: full effort, zero attachment. The practice shines brightest in loss. When Seneca's vast wealth was confiscated, he wrote, "This is what I owned, not what I was." Contrast this with today's identity brands, products sold as extensions of self. The smartphone as status symbol, the job title as identity. The Stoics would ask, if you stripped all that away at a police lineup, could friends still point to you? Start small with material indifference. Next time you're tempted by luxury purchases, ask, am I buying this because it serves a purpose or because I want to be someone? For reputation indifference, try the obituary test. Imagine your worst critic writing your death notice. Would their words change anything your loved ones know to be true? The real freedom comes when you realize indifference are like weather. You prepare for rain but don't take it personally. You can prefer sunshine without staking your happiness on it. That's the Stoic secret, caring deeply about your actions while remaining lightly detached from outcomes. Not "I don't care, but this doesn't define me." When you stop handing your self-worth to the world to hold hostage, you reclaim something priceless, the unshakable peace of owning yourself. Imagine standing at the gates of an impenetrable fortress, your mind, where every desire, every craving must present its credentials before entering. This is the Stoic discipline of desire, a radical training in guarding what you allow yourself to want. Epictetus, the philosopher who compared the mind to an inner citadel, warned that most suffering begins when we fling open the gates to every passing whim, letting external cravings storm the walls like invaders. The solution: station guards at the gates, your reason, your values, and interrogate every desire. Does this serve my humanity or degrade it? At first glance, this sounds oppressive. Why deny yourself life's pleasures? But the Stoics weren't preaching austerity for its own sake. They observed a universal trap. The more we crave externals, money, praise, comfort, the more power we hand to the unpredictable. Like handing a stranger the remote control to your emotions, their antidote was redirecting desire toward the one thing always within your control: your character. A wealthy merchant might crave a bigger yacht. A Stoic craves the resilience to lose the yacht without losing herself. The difference is everything. Epictetus' metaphor of the inner citadel wasn't about isolation, it was about sovereignty. Picture your core values as the fortress walls. Outside lie the preferred indifference, a things nice to have but not essential. You can welcome them in but never chain your happiness to them. A promotion, enjoy it but don't hang your self-worth on the title. A romantic partner, cherish them but don't make their love the foundation of your worth. The moment an external becomes a need, you've surrendered your citadel's keys. Modern neuroscience confirms this wisdom. Brain scans show that craving activates the same circuits as physical pain, which explains why unfulfilled desires feel like threats. Social media exploits this brilliantly, stoking endless cycles of want: the newest gadget, the perfect body, the viral post. The Stoic hack: rewire desire itself. Instead of "I'll be happy when I get X," train the thought "I'm already whole and X would be a bonus." One of my clients, a startup founder, practices this by writing 2 versions of her goals. "I must close this funding round to be successful" becomes "I'll pitch brilliantly and the market will decide." The effort stays fierce, the emotional stakes soften. Practical training begins with small renunciations. Skip the second coffee, not because it's bad, but to prove you can. Leave your phone behind on a walk to practice missing nothing. Each act strengthens your desire immunity, like mental push-ups. The billionaire investor Nassim Taleb calls this anti-fragility through voluntary hardship. By occasionally choosing discomfort, you build resistance to life's involuntary deprivations. But the real test comes when life tears a desire away. A Stoic student of mine dreamed of marathon running until an accident left him wheelchair-bound. His journal entry that week: "I wanted to conquer roads, now I conquer self-pity." Same virtue, new terrain. That's the citadel in action. When the outer walls crumble, the inner fortress holds. The discipline of desire isn't about having less, it's about wanting wisely. Like a gardener pruning vines so the fruit grows sweeter, you trim superfluous cravings so core values flourish. Because when your deepest hunger is to live with integrity, no external loss can starve your soul. Consider this paradox: the more we chase personal happiness directly, the more it slips through our fingers like smoke. The Stoics discovered a counterintuitive truth: that purpose isn't found by looking inward but by reaching outward. They called this oikeiosis, the discipline of action, the art of diluting self-centered emotions by pouring your energy into the common good. Picture a river that grows clearer as it flows outward. So too does the mind when it serves something larger than itself. History's greatest Stoics weren't hermits meditating in caves. They were senators, soldiers, and slaves who anchored themselves in service. Marcus Aurelius spent his mornings writing philosophical reflections and his afternoons hearing petitions from Rome's poorest citizens. Epictetus, despite his crippling leg injury, devoted his life to teaching others how to bear far heavier burdens. Their actions embodied a psychological alchemy. By focusing on alleviating others' suffering, they dissolved their own. Modern research echoes this. Studies show volunteering reduces depression more effectively than medication for some, and teamwork releases oxytocin, dulling the brain's stress responses. The mechanism is subtle but profound. When you're consumed by envy at a colleague's success, that emotion narrows your world to a pinprick of self-interest. But shift focus to mentoring a new team member, and suddenly your worth isn't tied to being above anyone. It's measured by how you lift others. A tech CEO client of mine struggled with imposter syndrome until he started hosting coding workshops for underprivileged teens. Watching their breakthroughs, he told me, made my own rankings feel irrelevant. I stopped checking LinkedIn obsessively because I was too busy being useful. Even small actions recalibrate your emotional compass. Holding the door for a stranger interrupts rumination. Carrying a neighbor's groceries shrinks personal grievances to their true size. Ancient Stoics practiced this like mental hygiene. Seneca would visit Rome's slums not out of guilt, but to remind himself that comfort is a privilege, not a right. One executive I coach keeps a service checklist alongside her to-do list. Did I make someone's day easier? Did I share knowledge without keeping score? These aren't moral gestures, they're emotional airbags cushioning the jolts of ego. Team sports offer a masterclass in oikeiosis. Basketball legend Kobe Bryant famously said, "Great players don't want to be the best on the team. They want the team to be the best." On the court, individual frustration dissipates when the goal becomes assists rather than points. Off the court, a study of hospital staff found that teams collaborating on patient care reported half the burnout of those working in silos. The common thread, self-concern drowns in collective purpose. For modern practice, start with micro-contributions. At your next meeting, make it your goal to amplify one quiet person's idea. On public transit, offer your seat not just as courtesy, but as training in relinquishing small comforts. The key is consistency over scale. Daily gestures rewire the brain's reward system to find satisfaction in contribution rather than conquest. But here's the crucial distinction Stoics made. Service isn't self-sacrifice. It's self-interest wisely understood. Just as a musician improves fastest by playing in an orchestra, we grow by harmonizing with others. That coworker you helped today might teach you a shortcut tomorrow. The stranger you comforted becomes proof of your capacity for kindness. Every outward-focused act is a deposit in an invisible bank, one that pays interest in resilience. Because when you stop asking, "What can I get?" and start asking, "What can I add?" you'll find the emotional stability you sought was never inside you. It was between you and the world all along. There's a pivotal moment, less than a breath long between when something happens and when you react. That sliver of time is where Stoic wisdom turns emotional chaos into choice. The discipline of assent is the practice of grabbing that moment like a lifeline, of interrogating every impression that knocks on your mind's door before letting it in. Epictetus, the philosopher who compared our thoughts to unruly dinner guests, put it bluntly. It's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about events. A coworker rolls their eyes during your presentation, that's a fact. The story you tell yourself about what it means they hate me, I'm failing, that's the judgment you assent to, the one that dictates whether you spiral or stay steady. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, triggers emotional reactions in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, takes a full 6 to 8 seconds to catch up. That gap is your Stoic Pause button. Picture a director reviewing footage frame by frame before it airs. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your raw impression might scream, "That jerk." But with practice, you can freeze that thought midair and ask, is this driver's behavior proof of universal malice or just someone rushing to the hospital? Even if they're rude, does their action injure my soul unless I permit it? Here's how to build this muscle. First, create a trigger phrase. Epictetus used, "Wait, let me see." To interrupt autopilot reactions, a lawyer I coach whispers, "Assent pending," under her breath when opposing counsel provokes her. This tiny delay breaks the spell of immediacy, creating space to ask the Stoics 3 questions. 1. Is this impression true? Not does it feel true, but would it hold up in court? 2. Is it within my control? Their attitude isn't, my response is. 3. Does believing this serve my humanity? Rage might feel justified, but does it make me wiser? For digital age triggers, try the emoji filter. When a snarky text arrives, don't reply first. Mentally replace the words with a neutral emoji like neutral face. This strips away tone, letting you evaluate the raw content. One entrepreneur credits this with saving a crucial partnership. He almost fired off a defensive email before realizing the attack he'd imagined was just a poorly worded request for clarification. Physical anchors amplify the pause. The Stoics practiced hand on the chest, literally feeling their heartbeat to reconnect with their inner citadel. Modern equivalents might be tapping your wrist 3 times or pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, subtle cues that signal your brain to shift gears. A nurse in a chaotic ER trains herself to touch her ID badge before responding to aggressive patients. That half-second contact reminds her, you choose how this enters you. But the real power emerges in repetition. Every time you withhold instant assent from a toxic thought, "My boss ignored me, so I'm doomed," you weaken its grip. Like refusing to feed a stray cat, eventually it stops scratching at your door. A student of mine tracked his assent victories by moving marbles from one jar to another each time he paused before reacting to his toddler's tantrums. Within weeks, the physical tally made visible what was once invisible, the growing space between stimulus and response where his wisdom lived. This isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. You're not denying anger's heat, you're deciding whether to let it burn you or forge you. Because when you stop mistaking every mental spark for a forest fire, you discover most emotions are just suggestions, not commands. And that changes everything. Death sits at your shoulder every morning, not as a grim specter, but as the wisest teacher you'll ever have. The Stoics called this memento mori, the practice of remembering mortality to sharpen life's focus. Picture a Roman general celebrating a triumphant parade through the streets of Rome, a slave whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." Far from morbid, this was the ultimate grounding technique, a reminder that all glory, all strife is temporary. Modern science confirms what the ancients knew. When we consciously acknowledge life's finitude, we stop sweating the small stuff and start investing in what truly matters. Consider how differently we approach time when faced with its limits. A study of terminal patients showed their regrets clustered around themes: working too much, expressing love too little, letting fear dictate choices. The Stoic twist: you don't need a diagnosis to access this clarity. Digital death meditations like the We Croak app send 5 daily reminders. Don't forget, you're going to die. Not to depress users, but to jolt them into presence. One CEO described its effect: when the notification pops up during a petty argument, I literally laugh out loud. Suddenly, proving my point seems ridiculous compared to savoring the fact I'm alive to have this conversation. The practice works because it triggers temporal discounting, a psychological shift where distant consequences suddenly feel immediate. that passive-aggressive email chain. Viewed through the lens of mortality, it transforms from a battle to be won into background noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote his famous meditations not as an emperor, but as a dying man. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. When you internalize that any day could be your last, urgent meetings lose their grip, while lazy afternoons with loved ones gain sacred weight. Modern adaptations make this tangible. Some keep a death jar, dropping a pebble in each morning to represent a day. The average jar holds 28,000 for an 80-year lifespan. Others write weekly, "What if this were my last?" Letters not farewells, but clarity injections. If I had 7 days left, would I spend 1 second refreshing social media? Would I hold onto this grudge? The answers become filters for living better now. But here's the secret the Stoics understood: remembering death isn't about fear, it's about love. When jazz legend Miles Davis faced life-threatening illness in 1975, he emerged playing with heartbreaking tenderness. Interviewers asked about the changer. He shrugged. When death sits next to you, every note matters more. That's memento mori at its best, not draining joy, but intensifying it. The latte tastes richer when you know it's one of a finite number. Your child's bedtime story feels precious when viewed through the lens of last times. Try this tonight. As you turn off the lights, ask, did I live today as if it might have been my last? Not with bucket list frenzy, but with presence. Did I really taste my food, really listen to my partner? The paradox: this practice doesn't make life feel shorter, it makes it feel deeper. Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you start noticing how much forever is contained in a single, ordinary moment. Cato the Younger stood in the Roman Senate, alone. His proposal to execute Caesar's allies had just been crushed, his political career left in ruins. As his opponents jeered, he didn't slink away in shame. He walked out with his head high, later writing, "They think they've broken me. They've only shown me where I need to rebuild." This wasn't denial. This was proheresis, the Stoic practice of seizing adversity like a blacksmith grabbing iron, not to mourn its weight, but to forge it into something sharper. The Stoics didn't just endure obstacles, they reverse-engineered them into tools. Modern psychology calls this stress-related growth, but the ancients framed it more vividly. Life's blows aren't stop signs, they're detour markers pointing toward uncharted strength. When a storm uproots an oak, its roots are exposed as shallow. The next tree grows deeper. That's the Stoic refrain. Your failed business venture, it's not proof of inadequacy, it's a spotlight on gaps in your risk assessment. A betrayal, a masterclass in discerning loyalty. Even physical pain carries gifts. Marcus Aurelius' chronic illness taught him to govern an empire from his sick, relying on clarity rather than stamina. The mechanism hinges on one question: what does this make possible? When inventor James Dyson endured 5,000 failed vacuum prototypes, he didn't see dead ends. He saw 5,000 ways suction didn't work, each elimination edging him closer to breakthrough. Jazz musicians thrive on wrong notes by bending them into new melodies. A client of mine, a surgeon forced into early retirement by a hand tremor, pivoted to coaching young doctors. "Losing my scalpel," he said, "gave me a megaphone." Historical cases reveal the pattern. Beethoven's deafness birthed compositions that ignored conventional aesthetics. His late quartets sounded chaotic to contemporaries but revolutionized music. Nelson Mandela's prison years became a crash course in unifying enemies, a skill no university could teach. The common thread: they didn't transcend their obstacles, they consumed them, turning barriers into fuel like trees photosynthesizing sunlight. Practical application starts with labeling. Next time you hit a wall, grab a notepad and split it into 2 columns: what this takes and what this gives. A layoff might take financial security, but give time to recalibrate your career compass. A rejection letter could dent your pride while revealing where your craft needs polishing. The Stoics added a third column: how this serves others. Your burnout becomes wisdom for teammates, your heartbreak, empathy for friends in similar pain. But the real alchemy happens when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" A tech CEO I admire keeps a failure resume framed in her office, every crashed project, every missed promotion, with annotations on what each taught her. New hires initially gawk, then realize this isn't a shrine to defeat. It's a blueprint for resilience, because when you start seeing obstacles as the curriculum rather than the enemy, life stops happening to you and starts happening for you. The scar tissue becomes your armor, the setbacks your secret weapons, and suddenly you're not just weathering storms, you're learning to sail by them. You wake up to a buzzing alarm at 5 in the morning, your warm bed pleading for just 10 more minutes. But instead of hitting snooze, you throw off the covers and step straight into a cold shower. That first icy shock isn't just a jolt to your system, it's a masterclass in emotional resilience. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, the deliberate practice of seeking out manageable hardship to inoculate yourself against life's inevitable hardships. Like a vaccine introducing a weakened virus to build immunity, these small, self-imposed challenges train your mind to handle discomfort without panic or protest. The ancients took this seriously. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly slept on the floor and wore threadbare clothes despite owning villas. Why? To remind himself that comfort was a preference, not a necessity. He wrote, "Set aside certain days to go without luxury, to sharpen your appreciation for what you have and confirm that poverty isn't evil." Modern Navy SEAL embody this same principle in their infamous Hell Week. By enduring days without sleep, freezing ocean swims, and constant physical stress, they're not just testing limits, they're proving that the mind breaks long before the body does. The lesson: what you think is your breaking point is usually just a suggestion. Today's Stoic challenges translate this into everyday life. Silicon Valley CEOs swear by morning ice baths to crush procrastination. Writers like Ryan Holiday practice digital minimalism, weekends no screens, just pen and paper to reset their focus. Even something as simple as skipping the elevator to take the stairs becomes microtraining for perseverance. The magic lies in the voluntary part. When you choose discomfort, you rewrite its meaning from "this is unbearable" to "this is my workout for emotional grit." Science backs this up. Studies on cold exposure show it spikes dopamine levels by nearly 250%, teaching your brain to associate discomfort with reward. Intermittent fasting isn't just about health, it's a rehearsal for handling hunger, literal or metaphorical, with composure. One Harvard study found people who practiced voluntary hardship, like walking extra blocks in winter, reported higher resilience during job losses and divorces. Why? Because they'd already proven to themselves that they could thrive with less. Start small. Next grocery run, park farthest from the entrance in the rain. At dinner, leave one bite on your plate despite craving it. These tiny acts build what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to sit with discomfort instead of reflexively escaping it. A Wall Street trader I know wears dress shoes a half size too tight during important meetings. When the market crashes, he jokes, "I'm already accustomed to operating in pain." But here's the twist: voluntary discomfort isn't about self-punishment. It's about detoxing your dependence on ease. Like a musician practicing scales to play symphonies, you're conditioning yourself to handle life's dissonant notes with grace. Because when you've willingly stood in the cold, the storms of adversity feel like familiar weather. Think of your mind like a crowded subway train. One push of a button and the emergency brakes screech everything to a halt. That's the power of the Stoic Pause, a 5-second intervention between life's provocations and your reaction. Epictetus laid the foundation. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. Modern neuroscience maps this space onto the prefrontal cortex, the brain's brake pedal that needs those critical seconds to override emotional hijackings. But here's the catch: without training, that gap collapses like a folding chair. The Stoics built mental guardrails to keep it open. Start with the body's cues. Before anger flares into words or panic spirals into paralysis, there's always a physical signal: clenched jaws, shallow breath, a surge of heat. Ancient Stoics called these Sympatheia, the first stirrings of emotion that precede full-blown reactions. One of Marcus Aurelius' most practical journal entries instructs himself, "When you feel the blood rise, count the teeth behind your lips." This wasn't poetic advice, it was a literal counting exercise to buy time for reason to intervene. Today's equivalent might be the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique, spotting 5 colors in your environment, 4 textures you can touch, 3 sounds, 2 smells, 1 taste. Each sensation is a stepping stone back to presence, for digital age triggers create friction. A financial trader I coached programmed a 5-second delay on his trading app after nearly liquidating his portfolio in a rage over bad news. Those seconds forced him to hear Epictetus' voice in his head: "You are not your portfolio." Similarly, leaving your phone in another room during heated text arguments imposes a physical pause. Walking to retrieve it often diffuses the urge to retaliate. The Stoics would have adored the undo send feature in emails, not as a crutch but as a modern temple of the pause. The pause isn't passive, it's the prelude to deliberate action. Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and tortured for 7 years, survived by partitioning each day into 5-second increments. "I can't endure 6 months in this hellhole," he'd think, "but I can endure the next 5 seconds." When his captors broke his leg, he used those seconds to memorize fellow prisoners' tap codes. What looks like endurance was actually micro-strategy, the pause as a lifeline. Practice this with if-then scripts before your next staff meeting. Script: "If my idea gets dismissed, I'll wait 5 seconds, inhaling for 2, exhaling for 3 before responding." The counting isn't arbitrary. It's the minimum time needed for oxygen to reach the prefrontal cortex and dampen amygdala firestorms. One trial lawyer visualizes a literal stop sign in her mind's eye when opposing counsel baits her. That red octagon triggers her training: assent withheld, wisdom loading. The ultimate test comes when the pause feels impossible, when betrayal, loss, or injustice scream for immediate reaction. That's when the Stoic pause graduates from technique to wisdom. Seneca described it as stepping outside the storm to watch it from a mountaintop. Not to deny the storm's ferocity, but to remember you are both the observer and the observed. Every emotional spiral that ever destroyed a life did so because someone mistook those 5 seconds for powerlessness instead of the most potent space they'd ever own. Picture 2 athletes standing on the podium, one grinning with a gold medal around his neck, the other empty-handed but radiating quiet pride. In that moment, the Stoics would ask a radical question: who truly won? Not based on the scoreboard, but on who walked away knowing they'd performed with absolute integrity, regardless of the outcome. This is the essence of character over outcomes, the practice of measuring success not by external rewards, but by the internal compass you followed to get there. Take something as universal as a job interview. Most candidates fixate on the result: did I get the offer? And let that binary yes or no define their self-worth. The Stoic approach flips the script. Their preparation checklist would include: did I research thoroughly? Did I answer questions with honesty rather than what I thought they wanted to hear? Did I treat the receptionist with the same respect as the CEO? These are the variables within your control. The hiring decision, that's subject to office politics, budget cuts, even the interviewer's indigestion. A client of mine didn't land her dream role after 5 rounds of interviews, but her refusal to badmouth a former employer impressed a panelist so much, he recommended her for a better position months later. Character compounds in ways metrics can't measure. Sports reveal this principle in high definition. Basketball legend John Wooden, whose UCLA teams won 10 NCAA championships, never emphasized winning in practice. Instead, he drilled players on tying their shoes properly because blisters from loose laces could compromise performance. His famed pyramid of success placed competitive greatness at the top, but its foundation was integrity, patience, and faith. When his teams lost, he'd say, "Did you give your best? Then the scoreboard is irrelevant." Modern athletes like tennis's Rafael Nadal echo this. After devastating losses, he's known to applaud opponents' great shots, a ritual that keeps him focused on love of the game rather than trophies. The magic lies in detachment from results, not effort. A Stoic entrepreneur pours her soul into a startup, not because she's attached to its valuation, but because building something meaningful aligns with her values. If it fails, she grieves, then asks, "Did I cut corners? Did I betray my ethics to chase growth?" A no means the venture was successful by the only metric that lasts, the integrity of its creation. History's great reforms, from Gandhi's Salt March to civil rights, sit-ins succeeded precisely because participants focused on moral action rather than guaranteed victory. As Epictetus put it, the good lies in trying, not in succeeding. Practical application starts with preemptive framing. Before any high-stakes situation, a pitch, a performance review, a first date, write down 3 ethical standards you won't compromise regardless of outcomes. For a writer, it might be, "I won't plagiarize even if my draft is due tomorrow." For a salesperson, "I won't exaggerate product benefits to hit quota." These become your non-negotiable victory conditions. One surgeon I admire keeps a sticky note on his operating room computer. "The incision is perfect or it's not mine." His success rate secondary to the precision he controls. But here's where modern culture gets Stoicism wrong. This isn't about rejecting ambition. It's about redefining what ambition serves. When you detach from outcomes, you paradoxically perform better. Studies of flow state show peak performance occurs when athletes and artists focus solely on the present action, not the score or applause. A pianist plays her concerto best when she's thinking about the music, not the critics. The outcome, it becomes a byproduct of excellence, not its master. Try this reframe next time you face a win or lose scenario. Imagine you're being graded by an invisible jury of your heroes, Marcus Aurelius, Maya Angelou, your grandmother. Would they condemn you for failing or for cutting ethical corners to succeed? That's the true report card, because when your tombstone reads, "They always got what they wanted," it's an epitaph, not a legacy. But they never compromised who they were. That's Stoic victory. Consider the last time you watched a sunset, how the colors bled across the sky, indifferent to whether you paused to admire them. That horizon doesn't exist in isolation. It's woven into tides, migrating birds, the breath of trees exhaling oxygen for your lungs. This is Sympatheia, the Stoic practice of recognizing yourself as one vibrating thread in a vast cosmic tapestry. Marcus Aurelius wrote of waking each morning to remind himself, "What I do today matters because I am a limb of the collective body of humanity." Far from abstract mysticism, this was emotional pragmatism. When you internalize that your joys and sorrows ripple through an interconnected web, personal slights shrink to their true scale. Modern ecology proves this ancient intuition right. Your morning coffee connects you to Colombian farmers, shipping routes, and soil microbes, all conspiring to deliver that single sip. Climate science reveals how a butterfly's wingbeat in the Amazon can amplify into a typhoon across the globe. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Epictetus taught that harming another is like a foot stabbing the hand. Both belong to the same organism. A Wall Street trader I worked with transformed his cutthroat mindset after volunteering at an urban garden. "Watching bees pollinate tomatoes we'd later eat," he said, "made my stock charts feel like a tiny subroutine in nature's algorithm. This perspective dissolves ego like nothing else." Road rage withers when you consider the other driver might be rushing to a hospital bed. Office politics lose their venom when you visualize colleagues as fellow ants in the same colony, each hauling their own invisible burdens. Historians note that Seneca, despite his wealth, insisted on traveling in crowded carriages not for penance, but to practice seeing himself as one thread in the social fabric. "Nothing is insulated," he wrote. "Your laughter feeds the air someone else breathes." Practical training begins with tracing chains of connection. Hold your smartphone and mentally map its journey. Congolese miners, Taiwanese chip factories, Indian programmers. Each link is a meditation on dependence. Try the 5 degrees exercise. Pick any stranger on the subway and imagine how their labor, directly or indirectly, supports your survival. The barista, she fuels your productivity. The janitor, he prevents disease outbreaks. Even adversaries serve as whetstones for your patience. For digital age Sympatheia, repurpose social media scrolling. Instead of comparing lifestyles, use each post as a prompt. What unspoken struggles might lie behind this curated image? A study found that people who practiced this for 10 minutes daily reported 30% less envy within weeks. Another tactic, keep a gratitude for strangers journal. Note the unseen hands behind daily comforts, the grid workers keeping lights on, the sewer maintainers preventing cholera. The deepest healing comes during conflict. When insulted, pause to ask, what brokenness in them might lash out this way? This isn't excusing harm, but recognizing that hurt people hurt people. A judge I know keeps a defendant's childhood trauma reports on his bench not to absolve crimes, but to temper vengeance with remembrance of societal wounds. Sympatheia doesn't negate justice. It insists we administer it as physicians rather than executioners. At its core, this practice answers our deepest loneliness. The adolescent belief that no one understands you. The Stoics reply, you're made of stardust from the same supernovas as your crushes and critics. Your heartbeat sinks to the lunar pull that guides tides. Every atom in your body was forged in a dying star's final blaze. You don't just live in the universe. You are the universe observing itself. That's the ultimate perspective shift, when you stop fighting life as a lone warrior and start flowing with it as a single pulse in the cosmic bloodstream. Here's a secret weapon the Stoics used to cut through emotional chaos, visualizing how an impossibly wise version of yourself would handle your current struggle. They called this mental model the sage, a hypothetical figure who embodies perfect rationality and equanimity. Think of it like emotional time travel. When you're stuck in a heated argument or paralyzed by indecision, you pause and ask, what would the version of me who's already survived 1,000 storms do right now? This isn't about pretending to be emotionless, it's about borrowing perspective from your own future wisdom. History's greatest Stoics leaned on this technique constantly. Marcus Aurelius pictured his mentor, Junius Rusticus, watching his actions not to feel judged, but to access cooler-headed reasoning. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius as if he were already the wise man he aspired to be, letting the act of articulating advice shape his own behavior. Modern psychology validates this with the Batman effect. Studies show children persist longer at difficult tasks when pretending to be superheroes. The same applies to adults. When you step into the role of your sage, you momentarily bypass ego and access untapped resilience. Try this with a current frustration. Say your roommate keeps leaving dishes piled up. Your raw reaction might be seething or passive-aggressive notes. Now switch lenses. Your sage sees the dishes as trivial in the arc of a lifetime, maybe even an opportunity to practice patience. They might calmly set a boundary and ask if your roommate is overloaded at work. The situation hasn't changed, but your emotional current has. A CEO client of mine visualizes his sage as a future version of himself at 80 years old, looking back. What would old me say about this quarterly panic? He laughs. Probably, relax, none of these companies even exist anymore. the practice shines brightest in moral dilemmas. Faced with cutting corners for profit, a Stoic business owner asks, what would the most principled version of me choose? Not what's easiest, but what aligns with integrity. Research on moral imagination shows that picturing an ethical role model activates the brain's prefrontal cortex, dampening amygdala-driven impulses. It's why judges sometimes visualize Lady Justice before sentencing. The archetype clarifies values. For deeper work, craft your sage backstory. Maybe they've endured betrayal but refused to harbor resentment, or thrive in chaos by focusing on controllables. A journalist I coach imagines her sage as a war correspondent who's filed stories from bomb shelters suddenly. Her deadline stress feels quaint. The key is specificity. Your sage isn't a generic wise elder, but your highest potential actualized. Skeptics argue this is escapism, but the opposite is true. By projecting yourself beyond the immediate heat of emotion, you return with clearer vision. Like an astronaut viewing Earth from orbit, petty grievances shrink to scale. The sage doesn't erase anger, they channel it into constructive action. They don't deny grief, they mourn fully but refuse to drown in it. Start small. Next time you're rattled, close your eyes and picture your sage sitting across from you. Notice their posture, likely relaxed, maybe amused by life's absurdities. Hear their voice calm with a timbre of hard-won perspective. Then ask, how would you hold this? The answer might surprise you, because somewhere between who you are and who you aspire to be, there's a version of you already living the wisdom you seek, and they're waiting patiently for you to consult them. Imagine spending years craving applause, only to realize it tastes like ash in your mouth the moment you finally receive it. This is the paradox of praise, a drug that promises fulfillment but often leaves its addicts emptier than before. The Stoics practiced contempt for praise not because they were arrogant or ungrateful, but because they recognized a dangerous truth. When you chain your self-worth to external validation, you hand strangers the remote control to your emotional state. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the known world, wrote in his private journal, "It's ridiculous not to flee from your own wickedness, yet spend your life running from other people's opinions." Consider two musicians at the peak of fame. Elvis Presley, despite his legendary status, became a prisoner of his own image, surrounded by sycophants, dependent on adoration, eventually retreating into isolation. Contrast him with Nina Simone, who faced racism and industry rejection yet remained unshaken, telling audiences, "I don't want your applause unless you understood what I just sang." The difference wasn't talent, it was where they anchored their sense of worth. Elvis needed the crowd's roar to feel alive. Nina drew strength from the authenticity of her art, whether the response was cheers or silence. The Stoic objection to praise isn't about rejecting kindness, it's about immunity to flattery's fickleness. Ancient philosophers noticed how easily applause twists into scorn. Seneca observed that the same Roman crowds cheering gladiators one day would demand their execution the next. Modern celebrities experience this whiplash digitally. Taylor Swift's "America's Sweetheart" narrative collapsed overnight during the Can I feud, only to resurrect years later. Social media amplifies this instability. One viral tweet can crown you relatable queen before the next brands you tone-deaf celebrity. The Stoic solution: treat praise like weather, appreciate its warmth, but never build your house dependent on its presence. Practical training begins with discernment. There's healthy appreciation. Your feedback helped me improve, versus toxic dependency. I'm worthless without 5-star reviews. A tech founder I coach analyzes every compliment by asking, does this reflect my values or just their preferences? When praised for ruthless business tactics, she'd deflect, I prefer being admired for ethical leadership. This filters hollow flattery from meaningful alignment. History's grounded icons share a pattern. They cultivated inner scorecards. Einstein cared more about thought experiments than Nobel Prizes. Artist Agnes Martin destroyed paintings that felt inauthentic, even when galleries begged to display them. their compass pointed inward. A Stoic exercise: for every piece of external praise received, generate 2 internal validations. If a client says your presentation was brilliant, you add, I prepared thoroughly and I stayed true to my message. This triangulates worth across multiple sources. The deepest freedom comes when you realize praise often reveals more about the giver than you. A standing ovation might mean the crowd connected deeply, or that they're drunk. A teenager's "you're lame" could reflect your irrelevance to their world, not your worth. Marcus Aurelius pictured critics as hands trying to physically shove him off course unless he stepped aside. Their words had no force. Try this reframe. Next time someone compliments your appearance, mentally translate it to, my brain's preferences align with your features. When they insult your work, this doesn't meet their subjective criteria. You'll start hearing evaluations as data points, not verdicts. The ultimate test: silence. Writers who panic when their posts get no likes haven't learned the Stoic secret, that creation carries its own joy, separate from reception. A violinist friend plays Bach's suites alone at dawn, no audience but the walls. That's when I remember, she says, the music was never about them. That's contempt for praise in its purest form, not rejecting appreciation but transcending its necessity. Because when you stop needing the world's nod to feel valid, you become like a tree growing in the forest, whether anyone hears it or not. Picture your mind as a cluttered attic filled with dusty regrets, broken promises, and 100 half-finished projects screaming for attention. Now imagine lifting a trapdoor in that chaos and watching sunlight pour in as you start tossing out everything that doesn't serve your peace. This is the Stoic art of subtraction, not as deprivation but as liberation. Where modern minimalism often focuses on decluttering physical spaces, Stoic subtraction targets the invisible weights dragging down your emotional life, the obligations that drain you, the relationships that diminish you, the mental loops that exhaust you. The ancient Stoics were radical editors of existence. When Seneca advised his friend Lucilius to set aside many things to find himself, he wasn't just talking about possessions. He meant pruning entire categories of mental and social baggage. Consider the Roman general Cincinnatus, who famously returned to his small farm after saving Rome twice, refusing power and luxury to preserve his autonomy. Or Epictetus, who owned nothing but a wooden cup until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands, then threw even that away. Their genius lay in recognizing that every non-essential we cling to isn't just neutral, it actively taxes our attention, our energy, our very sovereignty. Modern psychology confirms this. Decision fatigue shows that each trivial choice, what to wear, which app to scroll, depletes willpower for meaningful decisions. Social media's fear of missing out bombards us with phantom obligations. A Stanford study found that people who committed to digital Sabbaths reported feeling weeks' worth of stress lift after just 24 hours offline. The mechanism is simple. Subtraction creates space for what matters, like a sculptor revealing the statue hidden in marble by removing excess stone. Emotional clarity emerges when we strip away distractions masquerading as necessities. Start with the tangible. A client of mine, a hedge fund manager drowning in luxury, emptied his penthouse of 80% of his belongings, keeping only what he'd pack for a 6-month sabbatical. The surprise wasn't loss but discovery. I found a first edition Marcus Aurelius buried under designer shoes I never wore. But true Stoic subtraction goes deeper. Audit your emotional subscriptions. That friend who only calls to vent, the news alerts fueling rage without action, the perfectionism stalling your creative work. These are mental leeches. One entrepreneur I coach calls this her emotional balance sheet. Each quarter, she cuts one relationship, one habit, one belief that no longer yields growth. Relationships demand special scrutiny. The Stoics distinguished 3 circles: those who uplift your virtue keep, those who are neutral limit, and those who corrode your character cut. Notice I didn't say, those who annoy you, petty friction is human, but chronic energy vampires who mock your growth, subtract ruthlessly. A recovering people-pleaser practiced this by rehearsing Seneca's line before social events. Does this person's presence make me more or less myself? Within months, her calendar halved while her joy doubled. Digital subtraction is equally vital. Turn off notifications except for human voices that matter. Unfollow accounts that trigger comparison, not inspiration. One writer deleted his Finsta fake Instagram where he posted only highlights, realizing, I wasn't curating a feed, I was maintaining a lie. The liberation, he rediscovered the childhood pleasure of experiences untouched by performative sharing. But the ultimate subtraction is internal, editing the stories we tell ourselves. That grudge from 5 years ago, it's a Netflix subscription to suffering. Imposter syndrome, a mental pop-up ad draining processing power. Try this Stoic thought experiment. For every belief causing distress, ask, if I had to pay $100 daily to keep this thought, would I? Suddenly, most worries cancel themselves. The magic lies in what rushes in to fill the cleared space: deeper focus, richer relationships, unexpected creativity. Like forests where periodic fires allow new growth, your psyche thrives when deadweight burns away. Because subtraction isn't about having less, it's about making room for more of what actually feeds your soul. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait for the sun to rise to start his day. He met it with ink-stained fingers and a mind already at work. Before the chaos of empire could reach him, he'd sit with his journal, posing a question that would anchor his entire day. What is it in me that will resist the world today? This wasn't just morning musing, it was emotional armor forged in the quiet. The Stoics understood something neuroscience now confirms. The first and last moments of your waking hours act like mental bookends, shaping how you experience everything in between. Their rituals weren't about rigid productivity hacks, they were exercises in sovereignty, claiming your mind before the world could colonize it. Begin with the premeditatio malorum at dawn. While most people reach for their phones, flooding their sleep-softened brains with notifications and noise, the Stoics reached for clarity. Picture this: you wake up and instead of checking email, you lie still for 3 breaths and mentally rehearse the day's potential friction. That coworker who always undermines you, visualize responding with detached amusement rather than rage. The delayed train, see yourself using the extra time to read. This isn't pessimism, it's psychological inoculation. A trial lawyer I coach does this while brewing coffee, imagining every way court could go wrong. By the time she enters the courtroom, she's already weathered the storms in her mind, leaving her calm when they hit in reality. Transition from defense to intention with a propositum, a single vow for the day. Not a to-do list, but a quality to embody. Seneca wrote, choose the virtue you'll wear like a cloak. Maybe today's is patience, not as abstract idealism, but as a concrete filter. When my toddler spills juice, I'll pause before reacting. A startup CEO frames his as curiosity over certainty, a reminder to ask questions rather than dominate meetings. The key is specificity. Be productive is vague. I'll write 3 paragraphs before checking Slack programs your focus. Evening rituals turn reflection into recalibration. Where modern wind-down routines often numb us with screens and scrolling, the Stoics practiced examen, a forensic review of the day's battles. Not to self-flagellate, but to course-correct, grab your journal and ask 3 questions stolen from Epictetus' classroom. 1. Where did I confuse what's mine with what isn't? That frustration over your boss's mood, his emotions aren't your responsibility. 2. What did I handle better than past versions of me would have? You didn't interrupt during feedback growth. 3. What's one evidence that the universe isn't against me? The barrister remembered your order, the rain stopped for your walk home. The magic lies in pairing rigorous honesty with radical compassion. A client recovering from perfectionism adds a 4th question. Where did I practice being human today? celebrating the email she sent with a typo proof she's trading flawlessness for action. Physical anchors deepen these rituals. Light a candle in the morning to signal intentionality. Blow it out at night to ceremonially release the day's weight. One musician ties a string around his wrist at dawn as a tactile reminder of his daily vow to create without comparison, and cuts it at dusk, symbolizing the impermanence of both triumphs and failures. The Stoics loved these tangible metaphors. Seneca wore a signet ring engraved with "This too shall pass" to ground himself during political intrigue. For digital age adaptations, try voice memos. A journalist I know records a 30-second evening dispatch instead of typing. Today I conflated urgency with importance, answered non-stop emails but skipped creative writing. Tomorrow, 1 hour offline at dawn. Hearing her own voice makes accountability visceral. Another leaves his phone in the bathroom overnight. The friction of walking barefoot to retrieve it creates just enough pause to ask, do I really need to check this now? The ultimate purpose of these bookends, to shrink the gap between who you are and who you aspire to be. Most people live reactively, their moods dictated by external events. A traffic jam ruins their morning, a rude comment poisons their afternoon. Stoic rituals reverse this. You begin and end each day in the cockpit of your mind, hands on the controls. Even when turbulence hits, and it will, you're not just another passenger white-knuckling the armrest. You're the pilot, steady because you've trained for this, not in the calm of hangars, but in the unpredictable skies of life itself. The Stoics had a secret weapon for ambition, a tiny phrase that could deflate the pressure of any goal without dimming their drive, fate permitting. This is the reserve clause, a mental asterisk that reminds you that effort is yours to give, but outcomes belong to the universe. Picture an archer pulling back the bowstring with perfect form. Her control ends when the arrow leaves her fingers. The wind, a sudden movement in the target, even the Fletcher's craftsmanship in crafting the arrow, none of these are hers to command. The reserve clause is that moment of release, the acceptance that you can do everything right and still not hit the bullseye. Modern goal-setting culture often ignores this wisdom. We're taught to manifest success, to cling to visualizations of specific outcomes as if doubt were the enemy of achievement. But the Stoics recognized a paradox. The tighter you grip a desired result, the more it slips through your fingers. A tech entrepreneur I coach learned this the hard way. She obsessed over hitting a valuation milestone, staking her self-worth on investor decisions she couldn't control. When market conditions shifted, the disappointment cratered her motivation. Then she reframed, "I'll build the most innovative product in our niche, fate permitting." The pivot was subtle but seismic. She started sleeping through the night while working harder than ever. The magic lies in the clause's dual nature. It's not passivity, "I'll try maybe if the stars align." It's fierce commitment paired with radical humility. A surgeon doesn't say, "I'll sort of attempt this operation." They pledge absolute focus to each incision while acknowledging that unforeseen complications could arise. Ancient Stoics applied this to everything. Epictetus advised students to say, "I'll sail to Greece unless the gods prevent it," before boarding ships. Not superstition, but psychological readiness. Try this linguistic hack today. Take any rigid goal, "I'll lose 20 pounds by summer," and append the reserve clause, "I'll eat nourishing foods and move daily, fate permitting." Suddenly, a sprained ankle isn't failure, it's a detour. Or reframe, "I'll get promoted this quarter," as "I'll exceed performance metrics and mentor colleagues, fate permitting." Now office politics don't devastate, they're just weather conditions. The reserve clause shines brightest in relationships. "We'll stay married forever" becomes "I'll choose love daily, fate permitting." This isn't cynicism, it's reverence for the unknown. When a client's partner unexpectedly left after 15 years, he told me, the reserve clause didn't stop the pain, but it stopped the identity collapse. I'd always known the outcome wasn't mine alone to decide. For creatives, this practice is liberating. A novelist plagued by writer's block shifted from, "I must finish this manuscript," to, "I'll write 300 words daily, fate permitting." The block dissolved because she'd removed the tyranny of the end point. Her job was showing up at the keyboard, the rest belonged to the muses. Even Stoic warriors used it. Caesar's troops would chant, "We conquer, fate permitting," before battle, not doubting their skill but acknowledging luck's role. Modern equivalents, athletes who train relentlessly while saying, "I'll peak at trials, God willing," or activists who organize fiercely knowing policy changes hinge on countless variables. The reserve clause isn't about expecting failure, it's about expecting life. When you plant a garden, you don't rage at hailstorms, you tend the soil and let the seasons handle the rest. That's the posture this practice cultivates, back straight, hands open, eyes clear, because the ultimate freedom isn't controlling outcomes, it's knowing your worth isn't tied to them. Imagine holding a cup of murky water stirred up and cloudy with sediment. That's what unchecked emotions do to your mind. The Stoics had a practice called prosoch, or attention to impressions, where they'd pause mid-emotion and label what was swirling inside them. Not to suppress the feeling, but to see it clearly, like letting that cup sit still until the sediment settles and the water becomes transparent again. This isn't just ancient wisdom, modern psychology calls it affect labeling. And brain scans show it literally reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's panic button. Here's how it works in practice. You're about to present to senior leadership and your hands start shaking. Instead of spiraling, "I'm going to humiliate myself," you hit pause and name the beast. This is my body's ancient fear of tribal exclusion, a survival impulse, not a prophecy. That tiny act of labeling drains the emotion's power, like pinning a butterfly to a display board. The fear might still flutter, but it can't control you. Epictetus taught his students to greet every surge of anger or anxiety like a suspicious customs agent. What are you carrying? Where did you come from? Modern adaptations make this tangible. A client of mine, a trial lawyer prone to courtroom rage, started jotting one-word emotion labels on his legal pad, ego sting, when opposing counsel smirked, failure phantom when he fumbled a question. Over time, he noticed patterns. His fury often masked shame about preparation gaps. By naming it, he could address the root cause rather than lash out. Another technique is the emotional inventory, a quick mental checklist when tension rises. Is this primarily fear, pride, a sense of injustice? Just the act of choosing a category creates cognitive distance. The Stoics took it further with impression testing. They'd ask 3 questions about any emotional flare-up. 1. What story am I telling myself here? Example, my silence in the meeting means they think I'm incompetent. 2. Is this story provably true? Have they said that, or is it my projection? 3. What's a more accurate label? This is my insecurity about new colleagues, not their judgment. For digital age triggers, try the emoji hack. When a text message sends your heart racing, force yourself to summarize the emotion in 1 emoji before responding. That flirty but ambiguous message from your crush, instead of obsessing, label it roller coaster, anticipation anxiety, your boss's terse email, pushpin, perceived pin of criticism. The silliness of reducing complex feelings to cartoon symbols alone can burst their intensity. Parenting offers a masterclass in this practice. When a toddler screams over a broken cookie, you don't say, "You're overreacting," you label, "You're frustrated because it broke and you wanted it whole." That validation often calms them faster than logic. Apply the same to your inner child. That envy when a friend buys a house, try, "This is my childhood scarcity wound popping up. It doesn't reflect my current abundance." The ultimate power lies in differentiating "this is happening" from "this is my interpretation." Your partner forgetting date night isn't abandonment, it's a busy human slipping up. The stock market dip isn't personal failure, it's global patterns in motion. Like a scientist noting lab results without bias, you learn to observe emotions without becoming them. One CEO I know keeps a laminated list of Stoic emotion labels on her desk. Disproportionate dread, for small tasks feeling monstrous, mirror hunger, needing others' approval, future phantom, anxiety about imagined scenarios when stress hits. She scans the list until one resonates. Naming it, she says, turns the volume down so I can hear my own wisdom again. Because emotions are data, not dictators, and when you learn to read them like a weather report rather than a verdict, you gain the one freedom no one can take, the choice of how to respond. Life doesn't throw problems at you, it throws pop quizzes. The Stoics saw every obstacle as a carefully designed test from the universe, not to break you, but to reveal what you're made of. Imagine your toughest challenge right now, a missed promotion, a strained relationship, a health scare. As a level in a video game, the boss battle isn't there to crush you, it's there to force you to master skills you didn't know you had. This is the Stoic test, the art of flipping the script from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this trying to teach me?" Think of Marcus Aurelius ruling Rome while battling chronic illness and betrayals. His journals show he didn't view these as punishments, they were his training grounds. The impediment becomes the way, he wrote. When barbarians threatened the empire, he didn't rage at the injustice, he saw it as a test of his strategic patience. When his closest advisor betrayed him, it was a test of his ability to forgive without becoming naive. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, the idea that manageable doses of adversity, like vaccines, strengthen your emotional immune system. Navy SEAL don't dread Hell Week because they know each brutal moment is programming their minds to handle real crises. Apply this to everyday frustrations. Your Wi-Fi cuts out during an important call. That's a test of adaptability. Can you pivot to a phone call or reschedule gracefully? A friend cancels plans last minute. Test of independence. Can you enjoy your own company as much as theirs? Even traffic jams become mini exams in patience. A client of mine reframed his commute as Stoic Sudoku. Each red light was a puzzle to stay calm. Each aggressive driver a chance to practice non-reactivity. By the time he reached work, he'd already leveled up before his first meeting. History's greatest innovators played this game. Thomas Edison's lab burned down in 1914, destroying years of work. His response, "Thank goodness all our mistakes got wiped clean, now we can restart fresh." He saw the fire as a test of creative resilience, and within weeks he'd rebuilt better. J.K. Rowling framed her early rejections as proof she was in the arena. You can't get struck out if you're not even at bat. The pattern is clear. Those who thrive aren't luckier, they're just better at decoding life's curriculum. For high-stakes tests, borrow Epictetus' discipline of ascent. Before reacting to a crisis, ask 1. What skill is this testing? Patience, courage. Detachment. 2. How would my future self want me to handle this? 3. What's the win condition here? Not the outcome, but the virtue you could demonstrate. A surgeon I know mentally narrates tough operations like a tutorial. This complication is testing your ability to stay precise under pressure. Breathe, adjust. Gamifying stress doesn't trivialize it. It gives you a strategy to engage with it. Even grief can be a test, not of getting over it, but of carrying loss without letting it hollow you out. Create your own Stoic test log. Each evening, note one challenge and the virtue it invited you to practice. Over time, you'll start spotting patterns. Maybe life keeps testing your boundaries or your tolerance for uncertainty. That's not coincidence, it's the universe's way of strengthening your weak spots. Because when you realize storms aren't punishments but personal training sessions, you stop running from the rain and start dancing in it, knowing every drop is shaping you into someone unshakable. Picture your energy as a beam of light shining it outward in all directions, leaves you dim and scattered, but focusing it into a laser can cut through steel. That's the essence of the circle of influence, a concept Stephen Covey popularized but one that flows straight from Stoic soil. The ancients knew what modern psychology confirms. Anxiety thrives in the gap between what we care about and what we can actually control. The tighter you draw that circle around what's truly yours to shape, the less power chaos has to drain you. Think of two colleagues facing the same corporate restructuring. One obsesses over executive decisions she'll never influence boardroom politics. Market forces her nights spent scrolling news feeds, her stomach knotted with helpless rage. The other audits her sphere. Can I upskill to stay relevant? Mentor teammates facing the same uncertainty. Polish my portfolio just in case. Her focus isn't naive optimism, it's strategic energy conservation. The Stoics would call this ta ephimen, what's up to us. Epictetus framed it as guarding your inner citadel. External events may batter the walls, but only you decide what gets through the gates. Modern life bombards us with faux influence, the illusion that if we just yell louder on social media, fret more about global crises, or micromanage our adult children, we'll bend reality to our will. But the circle of influence exposes this as exhaustion theater. A client of mine, a climate scientist paralyzed by eco-grief, tried an experiment. For every hour spent reading dire reports, she matched it with local action planting trees in urban food deserts, teaching kids to test water quality. Fixing the planet felt impossible. This classroom became fuel instead of despair. The mechanics are simple but transformative. Draw two concentric circles, the outer labeled concerns everything that worries you, the inner influence what you can directly change. Now migrate items inward through action, worried about politics, outer circle, Supreme Court rulings, inner circle, volunteering as a poll worker, stressed about health. Outer, genetic predispositions, inner, daily walks and meal prepping. The goal isn't to ignore the outer ring, but to starve it of obsessive energy while nourishing the inner. Marcus Aurelius modeled this during the Antonine Plague, which killed millions. As emperor, he couldn't cure the disease, but he could organize grain deliveries, fund medical research, and show up in infected wards to calm panicked citizens. His meditations reveal the mindset. Don't demand that events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will go well, not surrender focus. Digital noise makes this practice urgent. That outrage-provoking headline, check, can my anger alter this event? No. Then can it fuel my next voting choice or community donation? Even relationships benefit. A mother I coach moved her adult son's chronic unemployment from her concern, circle his choices, to influence her boundary to stop bankrolling avoidance. Within months, he found work not because she nagged, but because she focused energy where she had leverage, her own wallet. The magic lies in incremental victories. Each small win within your circle, negotiating a better bill, fixing a leaky faucet, builds confidence to tackle larger challenges. Psychologists call this self-efficacy. The Stoics called it living according to nature, aligning effort with reality's grain rather than beating against it. Because when you stop trying to move mountains and start carrying stones, you realize something revolutionary. You weren't powerless, you were just misallocating your strength. Measure the circle's expansion not in grand gestures, but in daily recalibrations. That colleague who takes credit for your ideas, unchangeable, but practicing assertive phrasing in the next meeting. That's your domain. The traffic jam isn't yours to dissolve, but your podcast playlist turns gridlock into a university on wheels. Over time, the habit becomes reflexive. When chaos erupts, your first question isn't, why is this happening? But what's my move? And that's when you discover the secret. The circle of influence grows the moment you stop straining against its edges. Gratitude gets a bad rap these days, reduced to pastel Instagram quotes about good vibes only, or worse, weaponized to silence valid pain with empty, look on the bright side platitudes. But the Stoics invented a radical alternative, gritty, clear-eyed gratitude that doesn't gloss over suffering but mines it for meaning. This isn't toxic positivity's brittle cheerfulness. It's the unshakable recognition that even life's harshest teachers deserve a thank you, not for the pain but for the strength it carved into you. Take Seneca's famous letter describing his exile to Corsica, a barren island where he lived in a damp hut, accused of crimes he didn't commit. Where a modern self-help book might advise, find the silver lining, Seneca wrote to his mother, "This rock forced me to confront how little I actually need. For that I am grateful, no denial of hardship, no fake smiles, just the raw accounting of a man who discovered his own resilience because fate stripped everything else away." Centuries later, Nelson Mandela would echo this during his 27 years in prison, reflecting that his cell was where he matured enough to lead, not despite the confinement, but because of its ruthless curriculum. The difference between Stoic gratitude and its diluted modern cousin lies in the soil where each grows. Toxic positivity roots itself in avoidance, don't dwell on the bad. Like slapping a live, laugh, love sign over a crumbling wall, Stoic gratitude digs deeper. It inspects the cracks, learns their patterns, then mixes mortar from the debris. A cancer survivor I coached framed it perfectly. "I don't thank the disease, I thank the version of myself it revealed, the one who could sit with fear and still choose joy." Practical application starts with contrast journals. Draw a line down a page. On the left, list current struggles, a failed project, a strained friendship, financial stress. On the right, answer, "How is this sandpaper smoothing edges I couldn't see needed work?" That missed promotion might reveal your leadership skills were stronger in execution than office politics. Now you know where to grow. That betrayal, it taught you to trust your discernment faster. The goal isn't to slap a grateful sticker on wounds, but to ask with genuine curiosity, "What survival skills is this situation forcing me to develop?" History's greatest innovators embodied this. Beethoven's deafness birthed compositions that ignored conventional aesthetics. His late quartets sounded chaotic to contemporaries but revolutionized music. Steve Jobs' infamous firing from Apple became, in his words, "the best thing that could have happened." It led to Pixar and NXT, experiences that reshaped his leadership. The common thread, they didn't transcend their obstacles, they consumed them, turning barriers into fuel like trees photosynthesizing sunlight. But here's where Stoic gratitude becomes revolutionary. It actively seeks out discomfort as training. Just as firefighters drill in simulated infernos, you can thank minor irritations for fortifying you. That delayed flight isn't just an annoyance, it's a chance to practice patience before life demands it during real crises. A critic's harsh review, a free masterclass in separating self-worth from others' opinions. One entrepreneur I know writes thank you notes to his toughest clients, not for their rudeness, but for the thick skin and negotiation skills they forced him to grow. The ultimate test comes in grief. When a student of mine lost her mother, she raged at everything happens for a reason platitude. But months later, she found solace in Marcus Aurelius' distinction. Don't demand that pain leave your life. Demand that it leave you wiser. She began thanking small moments, her mother's favorite song playing unexpectedly, the shared recipe she now cooks for her own daughter. Not as compensation for the loss, but as proof that love outlasts death. This is the Stoic gratitude shift, not denying darkness but becoming alchemists who transform its weight into gravity, the force that keeps us grounded while reaching for the stars. Because when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" life stops happening to you and starts happening for you. And that's when you realize the most powerful thank you isn't whispered in easy times, but shouted from the trenches of your hardest battles. 25 practices, each one a key to unlock a different chain binding you to emotional turbulence. From the dichotomy of control to negative visualization, from the discipline of desire to the view from above, these aren't just philosophical concepts, they're a living toolkit for reclaiming your peace. Think of them like mental Swiss Army knives. No single tool solves every problem, but together they prepare you for whatever life throws your way. The Stoics didn't design these practices to turn you into an unfeeling statue. They crafted them to help you feel more deeply, more wisely, to engage with the world without letting it hijack your soul. Now, here's the challenge. Don't just nod along and move on. This week, pick one practice, just one, and test it like a scientist. Maybe it's the morning premeditatio malorum, where you mentally rehearse the day's potential friction before it happens. Or perhaps it's the reserve clause, whispering, fate permitting, after every goal to loosen your grip on outcomes. Watch what happens when you apply it deliberately. Notice how the coworker's snarky comment loses its sting when you label it ego sting instead of internalizing it. Observe how rush hour traffic feels different when you see it as a test of patience rather than a personal affront. This is how detachment grows, not as a single epiphany, but as a daily practice, like building muscle through reps. And here's the secret: you don't need to master all 25 at once. Even the Stoics stumbled. Marcus Aurelius had to remind himself daily not to let the noise of the palace distract him from his principles. Seneca wrote letters confessing his struggles with anger and vanity. What mattered was the commitment to keep showing up, to keep choosing wisdom over reactivity. So tell me in the comments which practice resonated most. Was it the journaling prompts that helped you spot emotional patterns, or the view from above that shrank your worries to size? Your insights don't just help you, they light the path for others walking this same road. Because emotional freedom isn't a solo journey, it's a collective awakening. The more of us who choose to respond rather than react, to focus on what's ours to shape rather than what isn't, the more we create a world where wisdom outshouts chaos. Your toolkit is ready, the first practice is waiting, all that's left is to begin.